Top5rapwebsite.com. You already know what's going on. We got people in the chat already. Yeah, it's a blessing. Shout out to y'all in the chat. XRV Gaming, Auto Ghost, Brian Fursek, Soup the Fisherman. Oh, he said, I'm here for some takes. It's going to be some takes. It's going to be some takes today. So, man, it's been a eventful week in America, right? So if y'all didn't know, I'm sure you know, the single-handed most popular political pundit, political person, right, was assassinated. Now, when I say political person, and I'm talking about Charlie Kirk, obviously I've done a video on him. When I say political person, I don't necessarily mean politician, because Charlie Kirk was not a politician, but I'm including politicians in this. Single-handed most popular political person in America was assassinated. I think the only person who is more popular than Charlie Kirk is probably Donald Trump and Barack Obama. So huge event that will possibly send America into a massive civil conflict. So anyway, that's out there. I'm not really covering the news and the updates with the assassin and all this. I just put a video out there, my thoughts on it. I took a day to do it. The day it happened, I thought I was thinking about doing a video on it, but I was like, I just found myself extremely disturbed, you know, because I saw the video. I saw the video where he actually got shot. And yeah, he got shot in the neck. So there was a massive amount of blood. You could see him stiffen up. I was just extremely disturbed, and I'm still disturbed. You know, me and Charlie Kirk are pretty much on opposite ends of the political spectrum on a lot of things. But I just found it extremely disturbing, right? So anyway, you know, all public speakers should be careful, right? So even Hassan, before we get into our video, we're doing an FD signifier video, and I'm feeling quite political due to the events of this week. So I say, you know what? Why not react to a little political video? Switch it up for y'all. You know, who wants to hear about Kendrick and Drake on a week like this, right? So anyway, even Hassan, and I'll pull up Hassan. I'm sure you guys have seen him. He's definitely on the opposite end of the political spectrum as Charlie Kirk. Even he is afraid, because no one with a platform reacted to Charlie Kirk's assassination and celebrated it. Like, the only people who are celebrating this stuff are like fringe people on social media, you know, anonymous profiles and just people on the fringes. No one with an actual platform like Hassan, who's actually debated Charlie Kirk. He does not like the guy. No one is celebrating that because they know they could be next. It is terrifying. Who wants to do a live event at a time like this, where assassins are walking around shooting you from 200-300 yards away? It should terrify everybody in the political space, but not just political, just in general. And by the next week, this top story going to be about Taylor Swift at a football game. Hopefully by the next week, this just blows over. And I say that, and it probably sounds kind of crass, but I would rather hear about Taylor Swift at a football game next week than retaliation over this. You know, because, you know, Charlie Kirk, he was a Republican. He was right wing. Just keep in mind, The right wing has a lot of the guns in America. So one of they and like the left wing, the liberals, they are anti-gun. So I would assume that they don't have guns. So I don't know if you want a civil conflict with the side that has all the guns, right? Odd week in America it is. So yeah, anyway, I did a video on the topic. I thought it was a good video. I really had to sit and edit that thing because my thoughts were so scattered, but I think it came out very organized in the end. So anyway, we're going to go into FD Signifier video, why Black liberals refuse to abandon capitalism. And, you know, I like to just get our definitions going first. Shout out to FD Signifier, one of the few people who show love to the channel publicly. You know, a lot of people find me controversial or whatever. So anytime someone just pops out and is like, yo, I mess with this guy, I think, wow, what a brave person. Capitalism is an economic system where private entities rather than government own the means of production, such as land, factory, resources, and operate them for profit. So it's capitalism, socialism. If you guys don't know, it's all about means of production. Who owns the means of production? Mostly, that's mostly what it's about. So anyway, without getting too preachy, let's get into it. You guys know my major was political science in college. I live in California, the most liberal state in the nation, and I went to college at a state school, the University of California, the most liberal, bro, I know some of these talking points, so they get it.
Events have brought it to my attention that niggas don't know what capitalism is or how it works. Further, I also recently made a video talking about Black conservatism, and I said this: Black conservatives do not deserve to be put on the same playing field of even an Amanda Seals. They do not represent a viable political ideology worthy of serious attention, and they never will.
So I actually think, and shout out to FD Signifier, I actually think this type of discourse is horrible. Yo, the other side, Black conservatives, they don't deserve discourse. Black liberals, they don't deserve discourse. Either way it goes, I think this type of discourse is horrible. It's harmful, and yeah, it's terrible. Especially, you know, we Black. Shout out to all the Black people in the chat. Shout out to the non-Blacks, but Black people, we know. I would say majority of Black people, if they took a political compass test, they will find they're a lot more conservative than they realize. A lot of Black people are religious. A lot of Black people are, you know, they hold a lot of conservative beliefs. But let me let them cook.
Both of these things are things I've talked about before in videos, namely the two Black conservatism videos I made on my main channel, which is FD Signifier, for those who might be new here for this video for unknown reasons. But even though those are collectively around like 3 hours long, they still don't cover everything about capitalism or Black conservatism. In reality, they're just arguing for rejection as what I see as
3-hour video. That's crazy. Yo, I'll make a video that's like 20 minutes and I'll be like, whew. Shout out to 3-hour videos.
Black conservatism and capitalism, but they don't spend a lot of time explaining why those two ideologies persist among Black people and why they must be contended with and ultimately rejected by Black people in pursuit of liberation. Before we go any further,
so this is what it's going to be about liberation. Yeah.
I want to point out that those are main channel videos, and this is the B-sides.
Yeah.
You know, the B-sides, this is a lot of hot takes.
Yeah, indeed, it's division. Yeah. Yeah, that's like me saying, yo, Black liberals, they don't deserve to any discourse. They're not even a viable, like their opinions are not even viable. I think that's just dangerous. And I think it's dangerous either way. But I'm gonna let them cook. Yeah, but I agree, Black Rabbit, it is division. Yeah, degenerate Sharnigan, yeah, it's division. Shout out to Cam in the chat.
This is not a lot of research. I probably spent more time working on this than I would a typical B-sides video because I wanted to make sure certain things were clear. None of my videos are the end-all be-alls on any topic. This is mostly done through my own previous readings and education and research on this topic over the course of the last few years or maybe even decades. So I stand on my right to change my mind. I stand corrected when that's necessary.
Yeah,
feel free to let me know what I missed or what I got wrong in the comment section.
Yep.
Cool?
Absolutely.
Cool. Let's do the easy part first. It is an extremely low-level argument to say that
he got that institutionalized beat playing in the background. That's what song is that off To Pimp a Butterfly? Shit don't change before you get up and wash your ass. Damn, I'm blanking right now. I'm blanking. Post what song that is in the comments.
Capitalism equals having money or pursuing money. Capitalism is not financial currency. It's not.
Now, capitalism is mostly about who owns the means of production. And if you've read the Communist Manifesto, that is like their main thing. Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels. It's about means of production, right?
The same thing. I am so disappointed in some of y'all. You are not a capitalist for having a job or even a well-paying job. You're not necessarily a capitalist for running a business or even being rich off your work and labor. Now, there are levels of wealth that are only possible with capitalism, and there are many ethical issues one might encounter when pursuing wealth or running a business. And there are so many complicated elements of egalitarianism and left-leaning ways that you might run a business. And
okay, the beat is Institutionalized by Kendrick, right? Okay, yeah. Man, hey, I'll be on point, man. I'll be on point, even when I'm not sure of myself.
Cooperatives and all kinds of stuff that I'm not going to get into. Maybe I'll leave a video or two that gets into that stuff specifically. But it needs to be understood that the state of having a lot of currency that you were paid due to your job does not make you a capitalist. Pursuing that currency because we live in a society where it's required to.
Oh, let's look up the definition of capitalist. Because capitalism is about who owns the means of production. But I don't know if a capitalist actually means that you own the means of production. Because in the Communist Manifesto, the people who own the means of production, they're called the bourgeoisie. So let's look it up. You know, I don't know everything. I'll be having to look stuff up. A wealthy person who uses money to trade and to invest in trade in industry for profit. So a capitalist, let's look up another definition. Merriam-Webster's. We're going to look up a couple of them. A person who has capital invested in business. A person of wealth. A person who favors capitalism, right? Owning capital. Capital being money and assets. Let's look up one more definition. What's a good definition place? Wikipedia? Do Cambridge Dictionary. Someone who supports capitalism. Someone who has a large amount of money invested. I don't know, FD. They saying a capitalist is a person who has a lot of money. A wealthy person is how they describe it. But let me let them cook.
That gets into that stuff specifically. But it needs to be understood that the state of having a lot of currency that you were paid due to your job does not make you a capitalist.
But he did put the caveat that you are paid due to your job. And a lot of these definitions, they mention in some way invested, right? But investing could be your job. But I'm gonna let them cook.
Pursuing that currency because we live in a society where it's required to have currency to pay for life does not make you a capitalist. It makes you a prisoner of the capitalist system, and you're just playing your role in it because you have to. Again, a lot of gobbledygook that I'm skipping, but I'm keeping things simple for a reason. I want to be clear that anyone that tries.
So FD, how do you define capitalist?
To defend capitalism or critique socialism or communism or Marxism or any other leftist theory by pointing out that you need money and have a job is themselves repeating CIA talking points. So no, I'm not turning monetization off on this video or my.
Yeah, I was literally going to say the reason FD is probably saying this, bro, I don't want to say he's rich off of YouTube, but it is quite ironic, right? For someone to critique capitalism, but then have the monetization turned on. That is ironic. That's like a very obvious counterpoint that someone could say. Like, why not turn the monetization off? I don't know.
Channel. This is my job. I do not work for free. Join my Patreon. It does have a $10 level if you want to support.
With the Patreon, with the tiers, yo.
I want to start there because these are some of the arguments that I hear from my own people sometimes when I say I'm an anti-capitalist, and broadly they work because this country has done an amazing job of distorting.
Okay, I need definitions, right? I think this is like the crux of every argument. Any debate, it should start off by defining terms. Anti-capitalist, opposed to capitalism. Let's see, what does it mean? Anti-capitalist views range from reformist approaches. Okay. Seeks to combat the worst effects of capitalism. Okay. Go ahead, FD Cook.
what capitalism is and what
FD is obviously an intelligent guy, but I'm not going to act as if the guy is somewhat of a Lamborghini left winger. Well, it is ironic. I mean, FD signifier, he's smart to address this at the beginning of his video, but it is ironic. It's like when someone says, "Oh, I'm what would they say? Environmentalist," right? And they're blocking the road, blocking traffic, talking about how we need to divest in fossil fuels, which is probably true, right? But then when you look at their clothes, it's all fast fashion. They have an iPhone that was, kids and young people had to go and mine those materials. So you're worried about like the BP oil trucks, but you got on fast fashion. Like you're contributing to the system that you are seeking to destroy or something. It's anybody, a kid could look at that and make that point. Like a kid who doesn't know anything. They could look at that and point out that hypocrisy. So it's smart that FD signifier addresses it, but I don't think it negates the point. To really make the point, you should just demonetize all your videos. Right?
means to be anti-capitalist. I don't even have to say that I'm a socialist or a communist or anarchist or anything else. All I have to do is dare to criticize capitalism, and some niggas will start talking about capitalism the same way they talk about Derrick Rose before he hurt his knee. And the question I want to answer with this video is why? Why is being critical of black capitalism so radical, especially consider that pretty much every major black political figure that we like to hang up posters of and have celebrated as luminaries up until the 80s and 90s, hint, hint, this will come up later, was incessantly critical of capitalism and understood that it needed to be destroyed in order for black people to be free. I'm not saying they were all communists. I'm not saying they were all Marxist, Leninists, though some of them were, but they were at least anti-capitalist, almost all of them. And we repeat their words, and they got movies made after.
Yeah, some of them, but there are different black political thought, right? There was vastly different black political thought. So a lot of black political leaders, they were in favor of capitalism. Brian says in the chat, the worst effects of capitalism can be solved only by the destruction of capitalism. But how does any of us escape from that except by living off the land and completely recreating economic systems? Well, I actually believe that the worst effects of capitalism can be solved with socialist programs. This is why I think the best political system that we currently have is democratic socialism, which is what you see in the Scandinavian countries like Sweden. And we also have democratic socialism in a way in America. Like we have socialist programs, quote unquote socialist programs, where the people pull money together to get the government to do a job. So I'm pretty sure like the post office would be a socialist program. It would be considered a socialist program. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like the police departments, these are socialist style programs, right? So I think the worst effects of capitalism, they can be addressed with, and I'm getting real political, but again, politics is something I'm pretty interested in. The worst effects of capitalism are this. I'll address what the worst parts are. Inherently, you are going to have a bottom class, a slave class, if you will. That has to be addressed. We don't have to destroy capitalism to address that, but we can make it to where there's no slave class by having minimum wages, by having livable wages, right? By having like affordable housing. That's how you address that, in a way. Another horrible part of capitalism is monopolies. Like, inherently, a business, their main goal is to seek profit, so they're going to consume and devour other businesses and shut off markets to any competitors once they get big enough. You counter that by regulation. So I don't think the worst effects of capitalism can only be solved by the destruction of capitalism. I don't know if FD Signifier believes that either. I think his whole thing is about liberating black people. You know, your counterpoints are stupid, no disrespect. Being anti-capitalist doesn't mean having no money. Yeah, that's not what I said. Charity is more effective than government. Yes, so some people would argue that private sector does things more effective than government. And that's pretty much what you're saying. Google AI. His name is Google AI. Yeah. So like the US Postal Service versus FedEx. Some would say FedEx is a private sector. Some would say FedEx is a little more effective, easier to deal with, because they have to compete. Whereas the USPS, they're just funded by the government. They don't have to do anything, right? There's no incentive to do better.
Them, we dress our kids up like them every February, but we don't engage with their actual philosophies. How did that happen? And here's where I circle back to the concept of black conservatives. And also I'm going to do some, again, grounded theory, meaning like this is me extrapolating stuff based on my own reading. This is not explicitly something I got from elsewhere. Let's make sure we first understand the historical difference between white and black conservatism, or maybe it's just best to say conservatism and black conservatism. And yes, that distinction is important. To put it simply, white conservatism, or conservatism in the West in its current reality and history, is based in capitalism, white supremacy, imperialism, among other things. White conservatism in America is literal in its name. It is seeking to conserve or go back to a way of life in which white people were not just clearly at the top of the social hierarchy, as they obviously still are today.
I don't know if I would agree with that. Again, if you guys watch my Charlie Kirk video, y'all know, like, I watch these opposing views. I would say white conservatism today is more centered around religion, right? This is what all the top like conservatives talk about. Their ideologies, they have so many different ones, but it's all kind of based in Christianity. Like I've never listened to a conservative, unless you're going to the extremists of the extreme. I haven't heard one say they wanted to go back to segregation, unless like you're listening to Nick Fuentes or something. How is it not what you said when you said a valid counterpoint would be FD not monetizing off his videos? Because we looked up the definition of capitalist. FD said that capitalism is not someone who's wealthy, who has a lot of money from working their job. But when we looked at the definition, most of the definitions of capitalists were wealthy people. So that was my point about capitalist, not anti-capitalist. I looked up the definition of anti-capitalist and there was nothing clear. If you're going to critique the video, that's fine, but you got to keep up, just intellectually.
Structure was explicitly endorsed by law. Landmark legal cases and laws like the Civil Rights Movement, anti-lynching laws, Loving versus Virginia, Brown versus the Board of Education, and so many others eroded some of this state-endorsed white supremacy. And when you hear white conservatives over time and even today say stuff like activist judges, states' rights, liberalism and wokeism is going too far, etc., what they're really getting at is, how do we get back to that pure, uncut white supremacy we had up until the 1950s, where most systemic forms of racism were explicitly endorsed by law?
I agree that conservatives, Republicans in America today, I guess he's talking about the white ones, they are very concerned about states' rights, right? But that's like the whole thing about being a Republican is states' rights. That's like the whole thing. That's why the Civil War happened. States' rights. Obviously, the turning, the big fire, torch issue was slavery, but it was under, the whole foundation was states' rights. Can the government tell the states what to do? So I don't know. When I watch these conservative people, I don't get that they want to bring back segregation or something. Unless you're like, again, you're watching like Nick Fuentes or like the Ku Klux Klan, like if you're watching their stuff. But if you're watching like someone like Charlie Kirk or like some of the more popular people, Theo Vaughn, like Joe Rogan, who's some people say is conservative, they're not really, even Alex Jones, they're not like, yo, let's bring back segregation. They're like, yo, states' rights, Second Amendment, stuff like that. Yeah, that's states' right to slavery. Yeah, exactly. Both sides are crazy, extreme on both sides. He's also straw manning the conservative end goal. Yeah, I don't think I don't think it's accurate to depict them in this way. I think some of his depictions are accurate, but I think the inferences that he's drawing from it, like, they want to bring back colored waiting rooms. I don't think that's accurate. That's not what I get from when I watch their stuff. And I do watch their stuff.
uncut white supremacy we had up until the 1950s, where most systemic forms of racism were explicitly endorsed by law. Black Republicans...
Soup the Fisherman said, Charlie Kirk has said that black people were better off during the pre-Civil Rights Act era. If you watch Charlie Kirk's video, he says that and he references Thomas Sowell, right? Let's bring up Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell. This is Thomas Sowell, a black conservative, right? So Charlie Kirk says this referencing this guy. And this is... It's like saying that black people were better off during the civil rights era. This is something that black people say too. He's not saying, when people say that, they're not saying that black people were better off because of segregation. They're saying black people were better off despite segregation. And they cite marriage statistics and like inflation adjusted income. What else do they cite? Like nuclear family, having families together, having black neighborhoods. That's what they're citing. I don't know if that's accurate. I've never actually dove into those stats, but that's why they say that. They're not saying it like, yo, we need to segregate blacks again because they were better off then. They're saying despite what was going on, they were better off.
And conservatives like Candace Owens, Jesse Lee Peterson, etc., mostly just act as useful idiots and puppets for this white supremacist political project, believing that they will somehow...
Yeah, Jesse Lee Peterson, yeah, he's a little off his rocker a little bit.
Be exempt from the end results of what right conservatives are seeking. Or I really think like Candace and Jesse Lee in particular and a couple of these other folks kind of just want to see us die. They have like this weird apocalyptic thing I think they're doing.
Again, I watched Candace Owens. I've seen her stuff. She'd be off the mark on some things. I think like she's scarred from what happened to her when she was a kid. When someone did something racist to her and then the NAACP came in to support her, and they just, in her opinion, in her own words, the NAACP made it way bigger than what it needed to be. I mean, even though what happened to her was extremely foul, she feels they made it way bigger than it needed to be, and it kind of ruined her life and the people who, like, the perpetrators' lives. So all of her takes are informed by that trauma.
When these folks step out of...
But yeah, when I watch Candace Owens, I don't think she wants black people to die. I do think this is just a very dangerous way to think. This is why people get shot. If you have enough people, like FD Signifier is saying, if you have enough people like him who are saying, yo, conservatives, they want to bring back segregation, colored waiting rooms, this conservative, she wants you to die. And enough people are echoing it on your side, and people are believing you. They're believing, like they're not going and watching the stuff that these people are saying. They're just believing you. Yeah, eventually you're going to get somebody that goes and kills them. Because you're making this like an apocalyptic type of thing when that's not what it is. It's just like there's nothing that I've seen from Candace Owens. And again, she says a lot of stupid stuff. But there's nothing that I've seen from her where I'm like, yo, she wants black people to die. I said this about Charlie Kirk. These people have plenty of horrible takes. You don't gotta make up takes. You can just take something they actually said and break it apart. You don't have to make things up. The content is already there.
Line they get put down. My favorite new example of this is what's...
I'll rewind it a little bit. Take it back like 5 seconds.
Apocalyptic thing I think they're doing. When these folks step out of line, they get put down. My favorite new example of this is what's happened to Glenn Loury in the last year or so. Glenn Loury is maybe the most decent, good example of this group, and he was fired from the Manhattan Institute, a conservative think tank, for daring to be critical of Israel as they perform a genocide in Gaza. Now,
well, yeah. Yo, the conservatism, their main thing, this is what I was trying to say earlier, their main thing is religion. And Israel, the Torah is essentially the Old Testament. It's those 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. The Torah is the Old Testament in Christianity. So if you're a hardcore conservative and a hardcore Christian, logically it makes sense to support, I don't want to say logically, but a lot of them support Israel because of what's in the Bible. In the Old Testament. The Old Testament calls for someone to go into Canaan, which is like part of Canaan is modern day Palestine, mercilessly slaughter everyone there and take the land back. This is what is in the Torah and in the Old Testament. So I watch their stuff, so I understand where they're coming from. A lot of their takes, the hardcore conservative, are informed by religion. So yes, they're going to have very strong beliefs about Israel. If you believe, the Israelis are the people who are mentioned in the Bible, I'm not getting into that. So yeah, if you're him or anybody and you're going against that core foundational, like this is almost a religious belief, and you're going against it, yeah, you're going to be disowned, not because you're black. You're going against literally a core tenet that they have. We'll read some comments. There's still sundown towns in America. FD isn't all the way wrong. Yeah, name some sundown towns. We should do content there. No, I'm just playing. We ain't going. we ain't going to none of those places. Tell who's Gideon? Tell Gideon to go over there. It's very dangerous, and a lot of people feel that way. Yeah, Candace is a grifter. Okay, there's only one scenario from many that you cherry picked. I forget what you're talking about. Oh yeah, a lot of people are mentally unwell that might go through with that. Right. I think both Democrats and Republicans need to stop characterizing each other as you disagree with me, therefore you're morally wrong. Because it's just going to escalate from there. And then, yeah, people get killed. As you can see what happened this week. Both sides, the extreme groups over villainize the opposite aisle. Yeah, it's not enough just to say, I disagree with you, your take is horrible, and your logic is terrible, you're dumb. That's not enough. People want to take the moral high ground. And then that just escalates. That's religious brainwashing. I mean, hey, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just saying what it is. Not all conservatives stand with Israel, just like not all liberals stand with Gaza. Yeah, that's correct. Not all conservatives stand with Israel. I'm just saying that if you're a hardcore conservative, and I said earlier, like FD is saying that the conservative movement, their main thing is based in wanting to bring back like segregation and stuff like that. I'm saying no, it's based more so in religion. So if you're a hardcore conservative, you're probably hardcore religious. And if you're hardcore religious, you've probably read the Old Testament and the New Testament. And when you look at what's happening in Israel, some of that stuff, like Israel is performing what they think is in the Old Testament. It would appear to me. So I think that's why you see a lot of Christians in like Israeli people stand together. It's like a religious connection. All people need to exist in the current capitalist reality. But if people view class versus race versus capitalism versus power, it ends up coming down to how beholden we are to capitalism. So class is a struggle. Yeah, I would agree with that. Class, it's about class, 100%. There is racism, but once you get past racism, you're still going to have to get past classism. In the modern Israel is not the, right. Yeah. Funny how they want to allow the Old Testament but claim to follow Christ. Who changes much of the Old Testament? Glenn Lowry is great. I've been watching and listening to his content for a decade now. He's not always right, but when he is, it's great stuff. Yeah, I don't know much about the guy, but maybe I'll check him out. Bro, I'm only sitting through FD because you're reacting to him. He's a tough listen for me. I've tried in the past, but you help balance him out, which is great. I'm perfectly fine with engaging with topics I disagree with, or even like, yeah, I'm sure me and FD Signifier agree on more things than we disagree on, but I'm not afraid to listen to an opposing viewpoint. We did this in college all the time, but it was during lecture. We had our little microphones at our desk and we debated it out. I mean, that's literally how I'm cut. That's my cloth.
Glenn, I've heard, is at least heading back to a more traditional form of black conservatism these days after being shown the door. So good for him, I guess. But any black person to the right of Glenn Lowry is not to be taken seriously. And as
I don't think that's not a proper logical conclusion, in my opinion. I think take anybody in the conservative movement who's like super political, who's in that group. I don't know how Glenn Lowry stood against Israel. Most people are going to be denounced. I don't think it's solely because he's black. I don't think being black helped him. But again, you're just going against a core belief that a lot of conservatives have.
I stated before, these types of conservatives who are black are a statistically insignificant political population, but I went over that in the last.
I disagree. I don't think black conservatives are statistically insignificant. I've always said this. You go back to my political videos from years ago. Majority of black people, of Americans, are more conservative than they realize. Go and talk to your grandma, your big aunties and all this. Go talk to them. You're going to find maybe they're not super conservative, but they're going to be a lot more conservative than what you realize. I think just the black young liberal population is a louder. They're just louder. But even with them, I think a lot of black people are just more conservative. You ask black people, all types, don't just go to colleges in California and, these liberal states, go all over and ask them what they think about open borders. Oh, should we just open the border? You're going to be shocked. You might be shocked at what you hear. I'm not going to be. But you might be shocked if you think black conservatives are statistically insignificant. Go and ask black people what they think about the Second Amendment. Yo, should we gun grab it? What should we do about the Second Amendment? Most of us grow up in neighborhoods to where, I know I did, if you didn't have a gun, like you playing, like what you think is a joke out here, you walking around this neighborhood without a gun, you're going to find that a lot of black people are more in support of the Second Amendment, which just happens to be more of a conservative ideal at this point in time, more support in the Second Amendment than you realize, especially once you get to the South. Especially, even when you look at something like, I'm trying to think of another topic where black people would be more conservative. Religion. Maybe more so the older black people, maybe like 35, 40 and up. It's more of a conservative thing nowadays. I don't think it's statistically insignificant. It may not be the majority, but it's definitely not statistically insignificant. I don't know. The vibe I get from this video is not like the other FD signifier videos I've seen. I think he's like, he's trying to, it's almost like he's demonizing black conservatives. Like he's doing one thing where he's trying to say like, this is like a very statistically insignificant portion of us. But then he's putting like the coon images and all this. I don't know what's up with this video.
This video moving on. What I want to theorize for this video is that black political
like it doesn't seem in good faith. You know what I mean?
In America right now, especially in mainstream media.
Yeah, a lot of black people are socially conservative. We just vote Democrat. I would agree. The biggest issues are abortion, religion, and gender equality. That's what causes the most uproar from those sides. Yeah.
Is dominated by black capitalist / conservative thought. And that looks really different from what I just finished mentioning, to the point where calling them conservatives is often met with confusion. And I get it, because the implication is that these folks are Uncle Toms, like the Hodge twins or Officer Tatum or Candace.
I just have such an issue when people say Uncle Toms in a negative way. I have an issue with that. Because Uncle Tom was a hero. I'm sure FD Signifier knows this. Maybe he doesn't. Uncle Tom comes from the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom was a hero. He was like a former slave who like did his thing, got free and did his thing. Sambo is the person in the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. That's what you mean to say when you're referencing black people who you feel like are coons or something. Not Uncle Tom.
Owens, but no, these folks are different, and I don't think they're Uncle Toms. Let me be clear here, because I've been around long enough to know that some of you watching will also be washing the dishes or doing something else and not fully paying attention.
No, we're here.
What I am theorizing is that we have two different groups: conservatives and real black conservatives who are coming from a tradition within black history.
So Barack Obama to him is a black conservative? Oh, I would like to hear the take on that.
Black political thought, that while I don't agree with and is fundamentally wrong and has been proven wrong through history does at least need to be seriously engaged with. But because of the nature of that word conservative, they probably would reject being called that. And where I want to start.
All right, let's define another term. Conservative. Conservative. Being conservative, we want a hard line definition. Conservative, and we'll look for a political definition actually, because it's a political video. Political conservatives is a philosophy that seeks to preserve traditional institutions, customs, and values. It's more of an attitude that prioritizes longstanding wisdom and gradual change over abstract reasoning and untested innovations. Do we have like any? Yeah, let's go to Britannica. I want to get a definition from a dictionary. Political doctrine that emphasizes value of traditional institutions and practices. And we'll look at one more. Conservative. This is based on Merriam-Webster. Or of relating to or favoring a philosophy of conservatism. All right, so we have to, conservatism. I love when dictionaries do this. Put the definition of conservatism on the same page. Oh my goodness. We're going to read the chats too. Give me a second. I just like to get the definitions down so we all on the same page. Inclination to preserve what is established. Belief in the value of established and traditional practices in politics and society. So pretty much every source is saying conservatism means like, valuing traditional practices. Let's see what he was saying.
Fundamentally wrong and has been proven wrong through history does at least need to be seriously engaged with. But because of the nature of that word conservative, they probably would reject being called that. And where I want to start with is that regardless of how these black conservatives that I'm speaking of here, the ones that are real and worthy of discussion, regardless of how I feel about the ideas, I believe that this other group of black conservatives is fundamentally pro-black and desire black liberation, even if it's a flawed and, let's be honest, ineffective and unreal version of it.
Honestly, the way I see it, FD is kind of just demonizing, throwing a black conservatives under the bus. Well, what we just saw in the last 2 minutes of this video, he has now differentiated black conservatives. So he says, there's certain black conservatives who I think deserve discourse. And then there are the other ones who I call coons and conservatives who I guess they don't deserve discussion. Yes, Sambo was the villain. That was a traitor from what I was told. Yeah, it kills me when, especially when someone's trying to call you a Uncle Tom. It's like, you don't even read. You ain't even read the book. Because if you read the book, you would be calling me Sambo, not Uncle Tom. But niggas don't read. Obama is more moderate. Yeah, he was very moderate. Fred Hampton, Huey P., Kwame Ture are black left examples. Obama is a conservative by that standard. Okay. I can. Yeah, Obama was definitely more moderate than anything. He was a war hawk for sure, which is kind of like a conservative neocon type deal. With the way I wouldn't say he's a war hawk. Let me take that back because he did try to de-escalate some things. But yeah, the Arab Spring and all that, what the drone program, dude was off his rocker for, on certain things. With the way Obama's been moving the last 10 years, he's more progressive. Like Dolph definitely said, Obama is like the last conservative president we had in like decades. Not conservative, moderate. He's more moderate than anything from what I saw from his policies.
Through the means and strategies that they're presenting. But in fact, historically, this group has been willing to pursue black liberation through radical and aggressive means at times. One example of this that I got to thank Lil Bill for by way of the book We Will Shoot Back is T.R.M. Howard. T.R.M. Howard was a pro-black, pro-capitalist figure that was also pro-blicky. And unlike most of his contemporaries, staunchly anti-left and anti-communist. He was greatly about black business and community organizing, and he was a mentor to the likes of Medgar Evers and Fannie Lou Hamer. And when Emmett Till was murdered in Mississippi, he was in a position to do something about it, and he organized an independent investigation and armed his people to the teeth and led a caravan of gun-toting Negroes in trucks from Mississippi to Chicago to seek justice.
Hey, so FD, would you call him I know we're on the conservative word now, but you started the video hearkening on capitalist. Would you call him capitalist?
So for him, being anti-left and being conservative didn't mean being anti-black. And I don't think he would have called himself a conservative.
I see what he's saying. So I think he views like the people he calls coons and all this, he views them as anti-black. That like he made the distinction. There are people who I call conservatives and all this, and then there are people who I call black conservatives who, and only the black conservatives I would engage with. And I guess they're the only ones who deserve real conversation. I think he feels the conservatives or whatever, he feels they are anti-black. That's like the differentiating factor that he's making here. Isn't Barack a Muslim though? What? Yo, Mark Oliver, what are you talking about? Child Benedict, yeah. Get ready for work, man. You good. Thanks for tuning in.
By today's standards, nor would he have hung out with the modern brigade that we see in conservative media today. However, I can imagine him finding synergy.
We don't know that. I don't know much about dude, but if he's conservative and then someone like Candace Owens is conservative and they share a lot of the same beliefs, who's to say he wouldn't go on Candace Owens' podcast? If they're both conservative, they're both donating to the same PACs. But I also don't think Candace Owens is anti-black. Like I don't get that from her.
Synergy with the
But again, I'm watching her long form content, so maybe I've become accustomed to the things she says. But I think a lot of people make these inferences off like one or two videos or a bunch of clips and things people said. Whereas when I watch the long-term content, I'm like, I don't know what y'all talking about.
Likes of Roland Martin, Bois Watkins, and other black leadership figures who focus on racial uplift, black entrepreneurship, and buying power as tools of liberation. In other words, he'd have probably been the modern black liberal, minus the whole armed and dangerous part.
I don't know about that. I don't know if you could say he would go from conservative to liberal. I don't know. I got to hear that again, bro.
Conservative media today. However, I can imagine him finding synergy with the likes of Roland Martin, Bois Watkins, and other black leadership figures who focus on racial uplift, black entrepreneurship, and buying power as tools of liberation. In other words, he'd have probably been the modern black liberal.
And someone has to educate me on him. If his views back then were conservative, why would he be considered a liberal today? It's two very different belief systems. If his views politically are conservative, why would him, having these commonalities with Bois Watkins and stuff in terms of entrepreneurship and business make him liberal? I'm just lost.
Minus the whole armed and dangerous part.
I think I missed a part because I keep pausing it. I think I missed a part because that doesn't even make sense to me.
And this is because the idea that black people could achieve an entrepreneur and economy their way to freedom is not new. It's just newly prominent. And if you're one of my more moderate viewers, you're probably thinking to yourself, high black achievement and black excellence and black business doesn't sound so bad or outlandish. Why are you against it? I'm not. And most people are not. The problem is the role that is playing in the idea of what black politics and black leadership and black liberation looks like. There was a time when black leadership was—
Now, I don't think FD is racist. I think a lot of people just fall into this political cesspool to where you come out and it's like anyone who disagrees with me on, is like less than or something. Or not even just anyone. Certain people who I find disagree with certain views. Like, I think it's just a lot of political cesspool going on.
Far more critical of capitalism and far less invested in the myth of black excellence and black buying power. There was a time when everyone from the more moderate folks to the more real radicals were denouncing the idea that black people should be attempting to recreate the same structures white America kept us under. And you would think the black radical tradition would help balance that out over time, but this is why I'm always critical of folks like Umar Johnson, who turned that black radical imagery and ideology into a farce and ended up having the exact same political outlook as his multi-millionaire friends. And I want to engage that first from the legitimate tree that this comes from.
Cultish. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, the entire internet is very cultish. Yeah.
all the CIA nonsense that sometimes ends up being put back into the atmosphere when people get pressed about their beliefs, but the parts of it that at a time were inherently pro-Black and valuable for Black liberation. And to do that, we have to look at the core figure in modern Black conservative history, Booker T. Washington.
Yeah.
Booker T. Washington is the quintessential Black conservative, and the best that term has.
So what do you consider him a capitalist? I feel like I missed a part where he transitioned from talking about capitalist to conservative. The echo chamber taking a toll. Yeah, sometimes when you're like in these, like, especially if you're in academia, I don't know if FD Signifier is a teacher. I don't know if I have him, or a professor. I think I might have him confused with someone else that I follow. But there's a reason they call it the university, the schools. There's a reason they call it ivory towers. You are just surrounded literally by your own, mostly your own thought process, right? So you guys have these conversations amongst each other. You go home, you have it with your friends who probably have the same political viewpoints as you. You have it with your, significant other. And then you guys kind of you're like in an echo chamber. You're behind the ivory towers. And then when you go out in the public and you start saying these things, some of these things in public to people who are not behind those ivory towers, some of the stuff, because everything FD is saying is not like outrageous. But when you start saying some of the other stuff, people are going to looking at you like, what? People who are not indoctrinated in that way, they're going to look at you like, what? And that goes for the left and the right. I think that's kind of what's happening to me right here.
To offer. He emphasized all those things I mentioned a second ago. He also emphasized not directly engaging with or agitating white supremacist structures in favor of building Black institutions up separately. He was a big fan of Black business, and he had a less right.
So FD, would you call him a capitalist? And would you say that he's upholding the same institutions that white people were keeping him under? Would you say, I don't know. Because it sounds like he's a fan of capitalism. It sounds like, I know Booker T. Washington. He was a capitalist. I mean, he was. And if you do think those things, do you think something's wrong with it? Or with him? Is he a coon?
Radical, more gradual framework for liberation. He wanted to build up Black people in a racial uplift ideology, and he thought that would be the key to Black people being treated more equally in this country. Because
that's exactly right.
Economic power, like other races in this country, to not be messed with.
That's a perfect summarization of his beliefs right there.
Casting down your bucket among my people, helping and encouraging them as you are doing on these grounds.
Finish the video, he gets to it.
Head, hand, and heart. You will find that they will buy your surplus land, make blossom the waste places in your fields, and run your factories. While doing this, you can be sure in the future, as in the past, that you and your families will be surrounded by the most patient, faithful, law-abiding, and unresentful people the world has seen. Booker T. Washington is often presented as the counter to a young W.E.B. Du Bois, as they were two of the most prominent Black leaders of the late 19th century. And it's usually presented as if Washington and Du Bois were diametrically opposed in terms of their ideology.
No, I was going to say, I don't think, because I've read both of them. I think they had a lot of similarities, actually.
And in many ways they were, but I'd argue that from a modern perspective, Washington and Du Bois have both been repurposed to undergird the same ideology of Black capitalism and Black conservatism. And this is where we get to the main thing I want to get at. What we have now, unlike even back then, is an imbalance on what Black political thought is taken seriously and is seriously engaged in our media and our political imagination.
Well, you just did that, FD. You just said you literally just did that. Like, no offense, you just did that like 4 minutes ago in the video. You said there are some Black conservatives who are coons and then there are the other ones who are considered Black conservatives who I think are actually worthy of conversation. I mean, you literally just did that.
We're often taught that Washington and Du Bois were on opposite sides of what Black people were doing at the time.
Nah.
Most of you have heard about the Atlanta Compromise, where Booker T.
They just had different methods for the same end goal. Different methods.
Washington basically said, don't worry about ending segregation or fighting for equal rights under the law. Instead, focus on building internal institutions for power for Black people. This was popular among a lot of Black elites and, of course, white Southerners. Washington was definitely more accommodating to white supremacy, which is something that is taught.
What is this, J. Edgar Hoover? Is that J. Edgar Hoover?
his legacy, and he did work explicitly behind the scenes to quell and undermine black radical action that Du Bois was trying to undertake. And yes, on the flip side, Du Bois wanted to be more direct in resisting segregation through protests, and this made Du Bois a radical for the time. But in reality, Du Bois was still very much black excellence pill. By the way, because I know somebody's probably about to do it, it is Du Bois. And if I see one of y'all try to correct me in the comments, it's Du Bois.
The French, is that a French? It sounds like a French last name, but that's how he pronounces it. But the French will probably have something to say about that.
Moving on. Du Bois was an elitist himself and not completely committed to a more radical or leftist response to racial injustice at this time in his life. So the idea that they were complete opposites is really not accurate. They even wrote a book together in 1907. But Du Bois is the father of American sociology and the most...
They wrote a book together. That's the modern equivalent of doing the podcast together. Both Du Bois and Booker T. Washington were more similar in black criticism. That's like what I've read. No, they didn't have the same methods, but yeah, they were both critical of black people in similar ways, and they had similar end goals. Not like end goals in the idea that Booker T. Washington wanted to create his own black institutions, and there's a lot of black radicals who would have an issue with that. Black leftists, why do you want to become the white man? This is why I'm confused why FD kind of abandoned the capitalist point that he was making earlier. I'm sure he'll get back to it. But a lot of people will call Booker T. like leftists, logically will call him like a coon or whatever, because they view him as wanting to, what's like some stupid shit they'll say. They view him as wanting to become the white man instead of breaking down the systems and all this.
Important figure in American leftist thought, black or otherwise, but he didn't start out like this. He started out much more aligned with black elitism, black capitalism, etc., just with a more aggressive view than Washington. And this is in part because Du Bois was
the whole distinction that he's been making the past 9 minutes is anti-black conservatives versus conservatives that he views as pro-black. That seems to be the entire point he's making right here. Yeah, Black Rabbit, shout out. Thanks for catching the stream.
Born elite from the Northeast, and Washington was born a slave and knew the realities of white Southerner violence in a way that Du Bois didn't understand. So again, to be gracious to this different ideology, Washington, knowing what white Southerners were capable of, wanted a gradual change, partly because he didn't want people to be killed. But here's the thing. Booker T. Washington died in 1915, and a few years later, Du Bois witnessed the Bolshevik Revolution and began moving much further left and incorporating Marxist ideology into his own. Soon we get Du Bois involved in Pan-Africanism and so on. And it's Du Bois who lived to be 95 years old who becomes the most prominent thought leader in black political thought, being a key but often under-discussed influence on one Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
It was because of Du Bois that King read
Populism.
Marx and studied socialism. And after seeing the limitations of even the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s, King returned to those ideologies and began moving further left in his final years.
That's true.
I'm repeating stuff I talked about in my first Black Conservatives video, but please understand that King was assassinated in 1968, 5 years after the I Have a Dream speech, because he was becoming more anti-capitalist, more anti-imperial.
Yeah, it was a much more populist, anti-capitalism message for sure. 1968, that's the year my mom was born.
And more radical after he made that speech. He was in fact assassinated on his way back to Washington for a second time to argue for reparations. And just a week before his assassination, he was getting into it with Andrew Young about direct resistance to the system and the need for being more anti-capitalist, as recounted in the book Profit of Discontent by
Teddy
Andrew
Roosevelt?
Douglas and Jerry Loggins.
Okay.
As Belafonte recalls the conversation that evening, it was Andrew Young, the future U.S. congressman and ambassador to the United Nations, who unwittingly ratcheted up King's anger. I don't know, Martin, Young said. It's not the entire system, it's only part of it, and I think we can fix that. King was having none of it. I don't need to hear from you, Andy, he clapped back. You're a capitalist and I'm not. The trouble is that we live in a failed system. Capitalism does not permit an even flow of economic resources.
That's fair.
Within this system, a small privileged few are...
I think there's a way you can regulate capitalism to where it's a more fair distribution. But that requires a thriving democracy. And what happens in capitalism is the corporations get into the government and prevent that from happening. That's literally what's happening in America right now. My pops was born in 1967. Oh, dang. My dad was born in 1970.
Rich beyond conscious, and almost all others are doomed to be poor at some level. That's the way the system works. And since we know that the system will not change the rules, we are going to have to change the system. And yeah, as you read there, that's Andrew Young, who went on to carry King's legacy in some ways, but in no way that represents this anti-capitalist message. And he's not alone in that distortion. The leftist ideology of King and everyone involved with that movement before and after him has been systematically erased from popular history.
Yeah,
if you don't have a Black Studies master's degree or watch a bunch of videos that I watch, you probably haven't encountered a lot of this at all.
Right.
Understand, the civil rights movement at its core was a leftist, anti-capitalist movement that was greatly focused on workers' rights. The first March on Washington started out as a labor and jobs march, and a lot of progress is made because of these actions. And when King and Malcolm were assassinated, the Black Power movement sprung up, and the Panthers sprung up, and they were even more radical, even more dangerous.
Yeah, that's true. That's why in my Charlie Kirk video, people were celebrating his assassination. I'm like, bro, when you take out leaders like that, there's a power vacuum, and what's going to happen is more radical thoughts are going to take place. People are going to rise up, and it's going to be a whole bunch of people, and it's just going to be worse than what you originally tried to assassinate. He's describing that, but happening on the leftist side, on the MLK side. We don't have capitalism. This is a mix of socialism and capitalism, and a mix of oligarchy. My main issue with America, like, I don't have the hugest issue with capitalism. I do have issues with it, but I think proper regulation can like kind of vet some of that. The biggest issue I think we have is there are too many corporations in our government that are blocking things like Medicare for all, universal basic income, better paid family leave. They are blocking it. And then they're just funneling money all back to the rich people who own the corporations. That's like the biggest issue that we have currently, in my opinion.
And even further left. And because of that, the government didn't even bother to engage with them the way they.
And people who are just, they're unwilling to. The other big problem we have is within the citizens. People on these opposite sides of political spectrum, we're at like a fever pitch. Like, it's just the lid is going to blow off the top soon. They feel that they have the moral high ground on the other side, right? Rather than looking at it as a difference of opinion. It always escalates to, oh, well, you support the death of this. And then it just is too extreme. And when people start doing that, it makes their viewership extreme. And then the opposite side counters that. They become more extreme. It's too much of that. So it's a divided population too.
Did with King and Malcolm and all the rest of them. They were just jailed, murdered, or exiled. But in the aftermath, the American apparatus recognized that they needed to change up their strategy, that fighting a radicalized Black population was going to be a constantly losing battle. And what they needed to do was buy a lot of us out. And a lot of folks didn't sell out per se, they just bought in. Richard Nixon, good old Tricky Dick, one of the most evil men to ever be president, which is...
A lot of people sold out. I met one of them. They came to my college. I'm not trying to slander nobody, but a lot of people sold out too. I've met some of the sellouts.
Saying a lot. He explicitly saw value in letting Black people in on the action, getting us away from radical action and moving us toward Black capitalism. A quote from a Time magazine article in 1969 says the following: as Nixon put it, the government should act decisively to help Negroes gain their fair piece of the action. The rather general idea that Negroes should lift themselves up through business ownership, as many other ethnic groups had done in the US, inspired hope and some votes among people of all races. Okay. To the extent that programs of Black capitalism are successful, said Nixon, the ghettos will gradually disappear.
Well, that sounds good, but you have to be earnest about actually doing that. And your implementation of that has to be earnest. It can't be the same way you implemented affirmative action and then the main beneficiaries were white women. Now, that sound good, but you got to be earnest about it. Sold out how? I don't want to get into calling people, they sold out to, their movement, what they stood for, what they said they stood for. A lot of those people from that era, they're still in jail. Some of them are free. Some of them sold out. I'm telling you, I met them. I met some of them.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It sounds a little bit like Booker T. Washington, and it sounds a lot like popular black leaders of today. Now, Booker T. Washington, he came first. He was in the 19th century, and for the time, he might have been on to something. Understand, capitalism wasn't the monster it is today at that time. It had not grown to be the engine of inequality that we understand it to be in the 21st century.
But I think capitalism was, at its core, similar to what it is today. The issue is it's the corporations have too much power. And that's making inequality grow.
The engine of inequality that we understand it to be in the 21st century. But by the time we get to Nixon, niggas knew the deal. Hence the resistance to Nixon. And if we knew the deal in 1969 with Nixon, and we had a whole example of the opposite of anti-capitalist strategy being more effective, how the hell is this black capitalism thing being something that's promoted so ardently by so many folks in 2025? Well, if you're wondering, this is where the most evil president of all time, Satan's favorite himself, Ronald Reagan, this is where he comes in.
That's a fact. Reagan is like one of the worst presidents ever. Reagan did a lot of bad, man. What up, Zero in the chat? Reagan did a whole. You can't just pick one thing. You can't just pick one thing. The war on drugs, you can't just pick one thing. The crash programs in LA, you can't just pick one thing. Reaganomics, you can't just pick one thing. Iran-Contra, you can't just pick one thing. The Mulford Act, you can't just pick one thing with this dude. But, you know, Republicans love Ronald Reagan. They be like, they love Ronald Reagan heavy. It's like they, you know, I can't get with it.
See, even under Nixon, the whole black capitalism thing wasn't working. Black folks overall still knew the deal, and not a lot had changed to even make the whole concept viable. But this was also at the tail end of all the efforts and work that the civil rights movement and the Black Power era accomplished. None of those things had fully come into effect yet under Nixon. Affirmative action, set-aside programs, voting rights, anti-discrimination laws, etc. These things didn't hit immediately, but when they did, when they started having true cultural impact, we see an explosion of black everything from the 70s going into the 80s.
So what, FD, would you say that what Nixon was talking about, black people, give them their fair piece of the action, would you say that that was working at first? I don't know.
Things are looking up and black people aren't selling out, they're buying in. They're keeping their black sensibilities. They're keeping their pro-blackness.
Yeah, FD signifiers his whole, I see what the whole thing is. He believes some people are pro-black and some people are anti-black. If you're moving the exact same way with the same capitalist beliefs, conservative beliefs, but you're anti-black, then you're not really worth it, in his opinion, or I'm just presuming based off what I've seen in this video. But if you have those exact same beliefs and everything, but you're pro-black, you add the pro-black beliefs, then you're worth it. People who have those same beliefs who are anti-black, they're not worth it. I mean, that's the whole thing right there. Killer Mike enters the chat.
And they're getting ahead with it, some of them. There were still tons of racism, tons of barriers, microaggressions. Please never forget that even the black president in 2008 was subjected to chicken and watermelon and monkey jokes.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that. Oh, yeah. Fox News used to go in on Obama for everything.
To at least this cadre of black folks that had made it to a certain...
Michael Reagan ruined the middle classes in colleges. Reagan ruined a lot of stuff. I don't understand why. There are logical Republicans who I think are logical who still just love Ronald Reagan. Like, y'all love Reagan. Like, what, y'all want to fuck Ronald Reagan or something? Like, this dude was objectively... His policies were objectively bad.
Point... They felt like they had done something.
Okay, I see. Yeah, the rewards were reaped from the left-wing struggle, not Nixon. Okay.
Generation of kids, namely Gen Xers and old millennials like myself, we had to stop playing the victim and take things to the next level. And a lot of us did. And suddenly we had a new class of black elites doing what black elites always have done. Understand that black excellence, black elitism at its core has always been purposefully exclusionary to other black people. It's why the Boulay exists. It's why Jack and Jill's exists. It's why the brown paper bag test existed. Again, looking at you, Steph Curry, and your whole entire
Yes, someone in the chat still saying Obama's not Muslim. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm like, what?
Jack and Jill's exists. It's why the brown paper bag test existed. Again, looking at you, Steph Curry, and your whole entire extended family of light-skinned people, that is not an accident. That is a choice.
What does Steph Curry being light skinned and his family being light skinned have to do with anything? Like, what the fuck are we talking about, bro? Like,
But what really brings us to where we are right now is, again, Ronald Reagan. Reagan recognized the need to erase the history of what had gotten black people to these advances in the first place, to take things even further in terms of counterintelligence than Nixon did. And what he did was...
Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover, you know, his counterintelligence joints was vicious also.
Really slick and effective. First, people don't know that the only reason why we have Martin Luther King's birthday as a federal holiday is because of Ronald Reagan. Much to the chagrin of his white peers at the time, who didn't see the long game. They didn't see the vision, but boy, Reagan was cooking when he did this shit. And then to double down, a year later, he became the first president to officially recognize Black History Month. And there's an explosion of recognition for it nationwide.
Pointless symbolic gestures as he takes from the lower and middle income with Reaganomics. Pointless symbolic gestures. Oh, Martin Luther King Day is a holiday. Cool. Oh, Black History Month, cool. Pointless symbolic gestures.
Why? And a lot of influence on what becomes the official Black History Month curriculum. So instead of being a complete telling of Black history in all its forms in America, we see a renewed focus on figures like...
Yeah, it's handpicked and curated by them. So yeah, that's when you don't get the full Martin Luther King message. You just get his nonviolence point, which is still an important point. But yeah, it's curated by them. So it's, genius move by Ronald Reagan. Him and the CIA was cooking at this time. Hate how ethnicity is so closely related or tied to politics. I agree. Yeah, symbolic, pointless gestures, facts. I really don't see the difference between how Republicans champion Reaganomics and how Christians practice communion. Wow, really? You don't see the difference between Reaganomics and communion? You're going to have elites in any cultural group. However, many don't see pro-Black as being ethnically, racially, or culturally prideful, but also class-based. Okay.
Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker, George Washington Carver, important legendary Black first figures who also just happen to easily undergird the narrative of Black liberation through capitalism.
Yeah. I mean, come on, man. This is who I relate to. I ain't gonna lie. Let me stop all the BS. This is who I relate to. Yo, get some money, man. If you want to protest and all this, shout out to you. Can we get some money going? This is who I relate to, bro. I'm gonna just keep it a beam. Let's get our money up, bruh. Not our funny up.
Meanwhile, someone like Nat Turner, Fred Hampton, they didn't make it to my middle school.
Shout out to them too. They got done dirty. We don't appreciate how they did Fred Hampton. When it went up into his apartment, with him and was it his wife or his girlfriend? It's foul. You know what I mean?
Curriculum much, if at all. Ask any Gen Xer or millennial what they taught you during Black History Month. It's the same handful of people that fit a specific narrative.
Right.
It's always about Black Americans who contributed to and found ways to flourish in the American dream, not the Black Americans who resisted and fought against American race.
I don't even know if I would say all that, because the people you just listed, hold on, let me go back a little bit.
They didn't make it to my middle school curriculum much, if at all. Ask
his medical, so he teaches middle school.
Gen Xer or millennial what they taught you during Black History Month. It's the same handful of people that fit a specific narrative.
Yeah. I would even say these people aren't they're not really teaching about these people that much. I mean, not from what I remember, unless they changed the curriculum. I didn't learn that much about Madam C.J. Walker at all. George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington. You learn a little bit about him, just a little bit. I don't know. The Black figures they talk about is Martin Luther King. You know what I mean? You get it. You spend a whole 2 weeks on Martin Luther King. But FD, he would know better because he's actually a teacher, right? Middle school.
It's always about Black Americans who contributed to and found ways to flourish in the American dream.
I don't know if that's true. I never heard about this type of thing. When I learned about Black people in school, most of it was slavery. I didn't hear about Black people getting rich off hair care and skin care like Madam C.J. Walker. I didn't hear about that. When we learned about like Black figures and stuff like that, it was like slavery and stuff. Black History Month curriculum was like slavery and Jim Crow. MLK. Who else? Who else they teach about? MLK and who? Yeah, Rosa Parks. Yeah, they not teaching about black capitalists who got rich and got a bag. I don't remember learning about that.
Not the black Americans who resisted and fought against American.
And they definitely don't teach about Nat Turner. You know what I mean? Getting vengeance. They don't teach that.
Racism
at all
as an inner colony. And this is no more apparent than how the legacy of King is bastardized today. Martin Luther King during his time was one of the most hated men in America. Yeah. But now he's Black Santa Claus to an entire generation of kids because they get to see him do the I Have a Dream speech while they're controlling Spider-Man and playing Fortnite. Yes, that's a real thing. And it's this generation of
I don't know if that's a bad thing. If this is the way you gotta indoctrinate the kids, I'm okay with this. Yeah, play that I Have a Dream speech during Fortnite, but play other, useful stuff too. But I mean, that's propaganda I can get behind. When is John Hanson going to get recognized as the first black president instead of Barry, who bombed the Gaza Strip? Ooh, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, MLK. It's always some struggle shit when they teach black history. I don't remember hearing about Madam C.J. Walker getting a whole bunch of money, buying a big old house, having a bunch of kids, living a great life. I don't remember learning about that. I remember learning about the Underground Railroad and joints like that. And, Martin Luther King and all them getting beat up, on the bridge, and, the Freedom Riders getting beat up, in, slavery and stuff like that.
Is because they get to see him do the I Have a Dream speech while they're controlling Spider-Man and playing Fortnite. Yes, that's a real thing.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And it's this generation of black
people hitting the gritty during the MLK speech. I support that. I actually support that. Now we can get some better messaging up here. I Have a Dream speech, great messaging. Let's completely kill racism amongst the youth. This is how, I'm fine with this. But let's also put some other important messages up there too so they can hit the gritty on it.
Xers, me and my older brothers and sisters that had this type of teaching that now are the most influential figures in our media today, telling you that black capitalism is going to save us and that anyone that questions it is a fool or is repeating something that white liberals made up. It's really bad. But it wouldn't bother me so much if that weren't a complete monopoly of thought. If the resources and attention that these specific figures had was not so completely focused on their specific narrative and all the dissenting opinions were excluded. Again, being gracious.
Yeah, that's our Raven. Yeah.
I believe most of these black folks think they're doing right by black people. But how would they know if they never actually engage with any of the thinkers to the left of them? You go back to the 60s and 70s and you see constant engagement with the black left, the Black Panthers, the Black Power movement, even Malcolm X was doing TV interviews. And yes, there were still black moderates and people talking that black capitalism shit then, but there was a balance of thought in our media, if I didn't agree with it. Yeah. But now the balance is having Amanda Seales argue with 20. And shout out to Amanda.
Yeah, I wouldn't just dismiss them as that. They just have different. He's calling them coons because he views them as anti-black. That's just what I gather. That's his differentiating between who he considers a coon and a black conservative. He considers one pro-black and the other anti-black. But I think the far more dominant black political thought is like black liberalism, right? I thought that's more like black conservatism. It's like it's less prominent. I would think. I don't know.
The Seals, because whatever criticisms you have of Amanda, she is, in my opinion, an anti-capitalist and a leftist, and her politics are good. Check mark.
Anti-capitalist.
Mark for Amanda Seals.
I don't know.
But if you
I don't listen to her. I find her obnoxious and just. I wouldn't even engage with someone like this in real life. I'll just let her get her shit off and be like, "You right, you right." Straight energy drain. I get this just from watching her on the screen. Straight energy drain.
This to be an actual valuable engagement with black political thought. We leave the
and I know I said earlier you should engage with the other side. It's not that I wouldn't engage with her because she has differing viewpoints. It's just something about the way she communicates that is just harmful to my spirit. It's a straight energy drain. Wasn't she an MTV VJ back in the day? I don't know. I don't know what she used to do. I thought she was an actress or something. Wasn't she on like I don't know. I thought she was an actress.
Out of the equation, it would be Amanda Seales versus 20 black liberals. Jubilee. I will go to that one. I will go to that one, Jubilee. Hop back in my DMs. Because once we do that, we're actually engaging in centering black political thought, not black political spectacle and counterinsurgency. And look, y'all.
Yeah, I can't even speak on the Jubilee thing. Because again, I'm not watching anything with Amanda Seales in it. Sometimes you got to remember, some people just want to be right and will die for it because they're so shallow they can only live for the ideals of others. Javi says she has crazy eyes. It's not even I wouldn't say nothing about her appearance or anything like that. It's not because she has differing viewpoints. I'm sure me and Amanda Seales agree on more things than we disagree with. Energetically, and I don't even be speaking in these types of theoretical terms, energetically, chakra, but energetically with her, it's a complete mismatch with me as a person. She did slam poetry. Oh my God.
These days you haven't noticed, I'm not trying to start no internet fights with no one. I'm not trying to air nobody out. This wasn't even the plan. I was supposed to be talking about Bill Belichick and his fetish for white wide receivers right now in time for football season. And I have been going out of my way recently.
Belichick has a lot of success with white wide receivers. Gronkowski, who's a tight end, but he was like the leading receiver in receptions and stuff. Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, also known as Western Welker. You know what I mean? He has a lot of success with white wide receivers. And she seems just argumentative for the F of it. Yeah. We can stop talking about her now because last Amanda Seales comment.
In fact,
Gracias.
To be amenable and palatable to black liberals and moderates, because I realize that while I may have a big YouTube platform, I'm still a very small drop in the bucket. And the black left and the black radicalism is pretty much the same. There's not enough flow of our ideas into the cultural zeitgeist of black people. And I think that can only be done by having cordial conversations and fair criticism rather than hit pieces. Although I may have one last.
Well, you can't say you have cordial conversations when you call in a huge swath of the black conservative population coons because you view them as anti-black. I'm sure they wouldn't view themselves as anti-black. I don't know.
That's the one I'm working on for later this year. And all
Tyler
of this
Perry
is why I think we should regard black capitalists and black liberals, no matter how pro-black they are, as conservative if those are the ideologies that they are holding on to. We should stop acting like the Candace Owenses of the world exist. Stop allowing them to be controlled opposition and present themselves as ideologies worthy of our engagement, because they're not. Instead, we need discourse and debate with actual black conservatives so that they can illustrate how this whole black capitalism thing is actually going to work this time around. And once we get past that fallacy, maybe then we can have a real renaissance of black political movement in this country, as we are well past due for it. I'm just a nigga that watches too many cartoons and looks like he works at GameStop. What do I know? I'm FD Signifier, and this has been light work.
Well, you're a teacher, right? I just think there's like an opposing message. You know, good video by FD. Give it a like. We'll give it a like. Make sure you guys subscribe. I'm not even subscribed because I don't like a lot of hip hop stuff on my timeline. It just messes up my algorithm. But yeah, shout out to FD. I just think there's a lot of conflicting messages in here. But I get it. I understand where he's coming from. There's someone on the black liberal side, even if FD Signifier picks the black conservatives who he deems are worth actually existing, because he says there are certain black conservatives who we should just pretend that they don't exist, right? So even if he picks out people who he thinks are once you start getting into that type of thought process, we should pretend you don't exist. We should pretend you exist. This and that. Once you start getting into that, he could pick like his 10 or 20 best black conservatives. There is someone who's left of him who's going to say, well, I don't think 10 of these 20 people you picked are worth having a conversation with. We should pretend like they don't exist. It's just really stupid to like start getting into that thought process. And it's like, I don't know. What do y'all think? Who's your least favorite president? Well, I haven't been alive for all of them, but a lot of bad things happened under George Bush. 9/11, the Patriot Act. After George Bush, that's when TSA came. You got to take your shoes off at the airport. Well, I don't. I got TSA pre-check, but you got to take your shoes off, this and that. The Patriot Act. There's another big one. Oh yeah, the recession. A lot of bad stuff happened under George Bush, boy. So he's probably the worst one that I've experienced. But based on my historical studies, I haven't studied all of them, but Ronald Reagan is probably the top worst. Ronald Reagan, I don't know one good thing he did. And I'll be trying to be fair. I don't know one good thing Ronald Reagan did. You just hit the 1 million mark, FD, you're not smart. Yeah, he be capping like he's not I'm a pretty big YouTuber. Bro, you have 1 million on your main channel and almost 400K on this one. Your word travels. Be mindful of those who think their ideas aren't being heard enough. That could be a persecution complex, which many sectarians are steeped into. Right, I agree. Guy says he doesn't think the Candaces of the world are worth talking to. I mean, that's you. That's you. You can totally feel that they're not worth talking to. That hurt our youth, and we haven't seen the full ramifications of it yet. Yeah, he destroyed the middle class. Facts. Yeah, George Bush and Ronald Reagan. Those are like my two worst. Yeah, those two the wars too. There was 9/11, the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was done because of 9/11 and the wars and stuff like that. But yeah, man. Then the recession after that, people lost their houses, their life savings. Like that was tough right there. That was a tough time. Trump not worse than Reagan? No. Just bar for bar? Bar for bar? No. No one's worse than Reagan. I don't think. Like policy for policy, the stuff that happened, Trump still got a ways to go to be worse than Reagan. You know what I mean? Iraq war, yeah, weapons of mass destruction, Afghanistan war. Like we still in the Middle East, low key. And then really with George Bush, you got to combine his presidency and his dad's presidency. That's like what birthed bin Laden and Al Qaeda and all this type of stuff. Your housing market crash, stock market crash. That was a messed up time, bro. Yeah, all that under Bush. Yeah, Bush was the worst one I experienced. I wasn't alive for Reagan, but I've studied Reagan, and he was like a generation before me. He was like right before I was born. But based on what I've studied, it seemed like he just couldn't do anything right, man. How do we determine who is or isn't qualified to speak on such issues, especially when it's a viewpoint you completely oppose? I get where FD is coming from. It's a slippery slope. Exactly. And that's how I end the video. It's a slippery slope. FD is viewing it based on who he believes to be pro-black. Like you could have two black conservatives who have the same social views and have the same like financial views, like monetary policy. So they are aligned perfectly conservatively. But FD can view one as pro-black and one as anti-black, which I guess would influence some of those policies. And he's going to discard one of them, despite them having 90% similar views on other topics. But for FD, I know people like this. Everything is like about black liberation. So FD will probably respond by saying, well, they can't be the same because if one is pro-black and one is anti-black, that's going to influence the social and the monetary and all this stuff. I get it. Like, I get it. Again, I'm in California. I'm surrounded by these people. I went to school with these types of people. I've studied with them. I've gone to conferences, African Black Coalition conferences. You know, I know this thought process. So I get it. But yeah, once you get into the business of determining you're not worth talking to, you're worth talking to, we should pretend you don't exist, you're a coon, you're cool. That is a slippery slope. I don't think that's helpful at all. So anyway, that's Friday's live stream. I think, what time we got? How long did I keep y'all today? Just an hour and a half? We done good. A lot of times I go over. I think the last 3 live streams been like 2 hours. Shout out to FD Signifier again. Don't be in a business of discarding people just because you don't agree with them. You guys just saw me watch this whole video. I disagree with a lot of the stuff in here, but it's important that we have these conversations. And it is what it is. That's all I got for today. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Top5rapwebsite.com. Peace.